Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and I'm the host of a Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present, and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. Hi, everybody.
Welcome, everyone, to the podcast. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. And welcome any newcomers today to our podcast. We really love to have new people on board. Today is a special podcast on information books in the classroom with our wonderful Year 6-7 teacher, Giselle from Nan Primary. Welcome, Giselle.
Hello, Sharon. Hello, Phil. How are you both?
Yeah,
Great,
good.
thanks, Giselle.
Good.
And
Good.
what have you been up to lately in your classroom? What's been?
Oh,
Yeah.
well, a little bit of a tricky one. We've only recently come out of a small period of lockdown, so the classroom, I haven't seen much of the classroom, it doesn't feel like, not properly for term 3. And so, looking forward to some proper classroom time coming soon.
Yeah, because we just started the term, didn't we? And then it went into lockdown. But so you were all ready to go with things, but then it all had to be put on hold.
Yeah, and changing those things into an online learning process, very, very quickly, basically in a 24-hour sort of period to get things in a different process and support students in that different way. I know many people around Australia and certainly across the world have had that experience. So it was our turn.
Yes.
It was our turn to give that a go again. So, it just made it very different and really highlighted, I think, some of the things we've talked about before on podcasts about why together matters so much, because when you're doing that online learning, it feels very individual and very disconnected of getting individual pieces of work back from students, but you're not getting them to see each other's work easily, and you're not getting them to see each other's thinking and hear their different perspectives as easily. And so that's certainly, it's a noticeable difference. You can probably get a similar piece of work in a very bland kind of way, I suppose, but missing those connections and that togetherness is the really noticeable thing. So glad that that's done.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
Hoping we just roll on and we're good to sort of restart the term properly.
And I think schools all over the world would be looking forward to those days when we get back to those rich classroom experiences where we are working together and it's not going to be interrupted like this. I think we're going to get closer to it, and that's great. So,
but in the meantime, big shout out to all teachers who are teaching in that way and making it work as powerfully as they do, given all the constraints. So, really, really admire and want to acknowledge all of those who are working in those circumstances at this time, and hopefully whilst we, I suppose a lot of the things we are talking about from the classroom, being together perspective, but hopefully there's still some of the things that we're talking about that may be adaptable, maybe, especially today, some resources that may still be ones that we can bring to our students. I know in this last week, one of the teachers I was working with said how one of the key pieces for every day was the children ensuring from one day to the next that the teacher would be doing the read aloud every day.
Yeah, lovely.
So grade 3, year 3
great.
class.
Yeah.
And so that togetherness, I guess, since we're on that little train of thought, that togetherness can still exist even when it's not, we aren't physically together, but being able to be together to still hear that story that our teacher is bringing to all of us has real power in it. So because we're never far away from books, are we, Giselle? And
No.
Speaking of books, let's talk about information books today. And I was just thinking about what could be the teaching struggle in this one, and I thought teachers often search for great information books to fit their mini lessons in English and also other learning areas.
can I just add into that that yes, I think that idea of when we're thinking about teaching information text.
Yep.
So the forms that we are often thinking about teaching our students to write in will be the information report, with that particular structure to it. And I think that's where today we can really go exploring, and I think that's where with, this huge range of information text that's coming into our lives as young readers, that there is so many more aspects to looking at not just structures of text, but features, those informational features of text. I think they become much more evident to us, and so reading texts that bring us more and more variety in features and maybe some of those structures. A lot of them are even more hybrid texts. So anyway, I'm rambling on. Giselle will be talking about lots of these things, but I think that's one of the pieces is, that move from informational writing that we do looks like this report. We might add in some, grab a photo from here or, collect something from there. But I think the books that Giselle's particularly going to be talking about today are offering, this whole new rich range of things for readers to explore and understand how they can bring their knowledge about topics to their audience in new and exciting ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that, Phil, something you said then about the struggle of that was something that I actually took from your previous podcast on the information text. I think it was number 33.
Yeah, it was 33.
Oh, my God.
Very good.
I know that one because one of my other ones sits around that number somewhere.
Right.
I can't list all of them by number, but
That was pretty good, though.
I knew it was in the early 30s there somewhere. Anyway,
Yes,
it was one of the things you brought up there, Sharon, about the struggle you had in seeing the types of information reports or information text that students were writing in the classroom. And that's exactly where the struggle for this element has come for me, is the kind of information text I was seeing from my students, which would follow I know there's a lot of security in some structures, but it meant for not necessarily a richly entertaining read for the audience, which is usually just me. But, for a student to think about how do you show what you know in this information report, and for them, I think most teachers out there could probably identify with the whole, here's my cut and paste report that I got from perhaps just the one website.
Yes.
And it was just, I was having such a struggle with that the things that I thought I was doing, I couldn't get the students to change those practices of, I might show what I thought was a great information text, and then they'd still end up cutting and pasting from the internet. So there was... And it was so evident that they didn't understand the vocab, and they didn't understand the way why, they picked a paragraph that perhaps had 2 or 3 of their keywords in it, and they'd taken that paragraph, stuck it on their own project. And I said, would say multiple times over the years that I know this isn't your words because I wouldn't even write this.
Yeah.
This doesn't even really relate to what our question was, does it? And the kids would sort of shrug and give me the look of, I don't know. And I'm going, oh, my goodness. Like it was just a practice that I really needed to shift and really needed to think through. And so when you spoke about that in the other podcast, I absolutely agreed that is where the struggle for me had come from too, and why I was starting to search out how I presented information texts in my classroom, and realised that I was probably not doing that enough other than when we were leading into some kind of research project or area for students. And so I wasn't letting them see that information reports and information texts have so much value on their own as they sit for a piece of reading, let alone using that as a tool to develop our own writing. And I'd really, I think, neglected that in the joy of bringing fiction and the, marvellous books to them, that I'd kind of let that go, other than when we might have used it for guiding our own writing. And so there was a real shift for me to think about how do I bring those texts in for the joy of themselves as a text, and then guide students into using that. And so I think that's probably something, I don't know if that's helpful, but I could probably talk a bit about that, to how I sort of worked through that process to get students understanding why we would look at these books, what we can gain from these books and the joy from these books before we even think about how they could help us to then structure our own writing afterwards. So.
Yeah, because in that podcast we talked about all these print features, graphic features, organisational features, and there was a list of items under each one of those headings of all these rich aspects that you could be
using to present and organise information.
We could be modelling in a mini lesson and showing them how they use this, and then they can use that in their writing. But I'm the same. I need to do a lot more of that.
Well, I think, I don't know, Sharon, if you would remember, one of the first lessons that we actually did in the classroom together, so not just, meeting in a workshop sense, but one of the first lessons we did in the classroom together was in my classroom looking at the Olympics posters.
Yes, I remember it so clearly, Giselle.
Because came back so strongly when I was listening to that previous podcast, because we're obviously at the time approaching the Olympics that are now currently on. And so for people who I should explain, back in the 2000 Sydney Olympics, the Advertiser paper here in South Australia had presented 50 posters over a period of weeks, 50 posters about individual sports of the Olympics, and so I had collected the whole set years and years ago. And then when you and I, Sharon, were talking about information text and pulling out text features, and I said, well, I've got these and I really want to use them. And I just lit up and went, ooh, hang on, because these posters are simply amazing for looking at text features.
They're like
almost all of them.
Yeah, they're like gold medal material. They are so good.
And they've got tables, they've got captions, they've got diagrams, they've got timelines, they've got cutaways, they've got inset, it was just amazing. And so that lesson that we did that day really stuck with me to the point that, just end of last term, as we were nearing the end of term, pulled out those posters again for the students and said, right, we're looking at text features. And the way that we did that with those posters had little labels printed of all the text feature names, so that the students could literally just place it where they named and noticed it on the poster. And so each student or each pair of students had a different sport, so each poster had that slight differentiation for the group. We weren't all looking at the exact same swimming poster.
No, that was the wonder of it, wasn't it? You know, that all these different posters, but identifying, as you say, naming and noticing the features that were on that poster.
Yeah, just amazing, and they're the kind of thing that could come out multiple times. Didn't have to relate to Olympics, but would come out multiple times because there's so much reading in there. There's so much interest. There's history. There's current rules, current uniform. It was just something that really. There's only a little bit on it that's dated because it would say the dates of when it was going to appear in the Sydney 2000 Olympics.
Yeah.
But other than that, they don't date because it's an information text that's pretty well the same for those particular sports. And so, but I found a book that actually, I love this book, and I've used this book multiple times, and I don't know if you know it, but it's by DK, the Dorian Kindersley, which I know you mentioned as a publishing company before, and it's literally called The Sports Book. I have one of the original copies, which was wrapped in artificial turf. So it's actually a fuzzy book. It's amazing. I was looking it up the other day because I thought I've got a copy in my classroom, but I felt like because it's been updated a few times, I was going to get the new copy. The new copy is wrapped in tennis ball fluff.
Oh,
so, I don't know what that is. It's probably a technical term for that, is there? But
I don't know, but we know what you mean.
So it's yellow and it looks like, a book-shaped tennis ball. It's fabulous.
For goodness sake.
But those Olympic posters are basically the way this book is laid out. That every page I can't even tell you how many sports are in it.
Yeah.
But it goes through not just Olympics. It goes through team sports. It goes through ball sports. It goes through animal-based sports. It goes through extreme sports, winter sports, motor-based sports. It's phenomenal for anyone who enjoys sports. But as a tool for talking about text features, this book would be everything because many students will be engaged by sport, not all of them, but many of them. And taking a page out of this book to show students about, which category are we in right now? How can we tell we're in the category of motorsport? What's this diagram showing us? What's this table about? And getting them to highlight what else is on that page and then literally flipping over 3 pages and going, what's on this one? Like it's just an amazing book, and it's, it's a joy for students to sit and read that for themselves in the corner for just looking through it. But as a teaching tool, it's incredibly set out for supporting that investigation and that inquiry into text features and what those features are doing.
Yes, and that's the key to it, isn't it? That what are the features, but what do the features do? So as a reader, so that read it like a writer. So what is this doing for me as the reader, so that I can then, what's its function, what's its purpose, so that I can then, as a writer, go, if I want to present, I could present this information in that way, or I need, a heading's going to, be so precise about what this is, it's not going to involve, so we, through that noticing, we really get a sense of how to reproduce something as a writer because we understand what it's doing for us as the reader.
Yeah. Yeah.
All the books that you mention in this podcast will be on the show notes so that anyone, because it's that time again, Giselle, where everyone's on the, if they're listening to this in the car, they'll be going, I've got to pull over and write this down.
Yes.
So all the, very generously, as you always do, all those books will be ready, for people to follow up on in the show notes.
And I guess the other point is, yes, we would use these books in a mini lesson, but we would also in our classroom library have a selection of a good selection of information books, because we'll want the kids to then go into those books to look for those features as well.
I could not agree more. Yeah. I absolutely agree. And as I was saying earlier about the struggle that I was having with the way students were writing their information text, took that all the way back to they didn't really know how to read the information text. And I really spent some time thinking about that because particularly for myself, I have little people at home who are in their early reading stages, and so many of the early reading books are non-fiction.
It's
not just that they're always reading fiction ones. Like even from the very, very first book, which has a picture of baby and says, with labels pointing to the parts of the body that you're trying to teach the baby the words for. Like so many of the books for our early reading experiences are often non-fiction, and then we sort of lose track of that a little bit as the joy of reading and just look at them as, oh, this is a book you need for your research. And I think that I'd forgotten to tell students or show students how much pleasure there is in finding information. And we can see that from the kids who always read the Guinness Book of Records. Partly it's comfort with the structure and they feel comfortable, they know what they're getting. But kids love facts. They love facts. And that's what information is. And so for me, it was about tapping into that and going, I've forgotten this whole area that you actually really do enjoy, and I know you enjoy, but I'm not letting you enjoy it because I'm forgetting to show you what's available for your reading in that sense, and I'm only telling you that you can use those books when it's time to do your research project. And that was doing a disservice to my students about their reading choices and about their reading skills.
And I think you're
when
right.
they thought they could only read it for a particular purpose.
I think you're right about also starting at a very young age. I think from a very young age, children can be learning about the wonderful aspects of non-fiction. The way print features or graphic features are being used,
as well as the information.
There's that.
And using them, they should be part of our read aloud diet. Those that we are, and as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of what we would call hybrid texts now that are, that will have, might be called, an informational narrative, but one of the books or the series that I love are A Seed is Sleepy, An Egg is Quiet. Those books have this wonderful narrative element running through. So a seed is sleepy, a seed...
a rock is lively.
Yes, yes,
I
know. So do I, because it's so surprising.
Yes.
But, there's this sort of narrative verse that runs through those books, and then the pages are full of these beautiful illustrations that are labelled with diagrams, that are labelled with timelines or growth lines or measurements, etc. But they make for such great read alouds too. Bringing that information that's not only just might not just be in, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that either, where we just read a paragraph of just such vibrant facts about something, the insights that we'll learn about something, the things that we never knew. And that's what good read alouds should be, that we're bringing things to our students that they don't know.
Yes.
And things that they might not necessarily be able to we say a read aloud would be text that our students can't access for themselves, and that might be around vocabulary and what those things mean. And so bringing this information text through read aloud adds another layer for us, even if we're not even looking at features and whatnot, but just that idea of, like you said, Giselle, that we read to learn about things.
Yeah.
Just, about our world.
And two books that I absolutely love for that, really love for that. One of them, it's exactly, it's everything you're just saying, because it's called This Is Our World, From Alaska to the Amazon, Meet 20 Children Just Like You. And it is told as a narrative. I would imagine them probably fictional people, but they all start with, hello, I'm Ezra and I'm from Cappadocia in Turkey and this is my life. And this glorious double-page spread full of amazing illustrations that have, it's not a stream of text. There's paragraphs placed in different places all over the page. And each child in all of these locations around the world talks about their life, their family, their education, what education looks like, the way that they live or the way that they dress, so what kind of dwelling they live in, what their daily lifestyle is like. And then the last sort of part on each page is a little bit about their future. So it's a child that might talk about the urbanisation of their space, or a child that's talking about the Amazon girl talks about the habitat destruction in her area. And it's just amazing. It is a perfect read aloud that you would read one of these children's, well, we actually do read it aloud for our daughter at night. She has one of these children as her story every night. She just adores it, and it's not really meant for her. It is certainly an older book. And you would be reading it in a primary years, but it's just incredible. And around the page it's a very full page, and so there's it talks about 6 or 7 animals from that particular habitat. It talks about places I didn't really know about, and so I'm learning things as I read it, but it's all just told in this it feels like a narrative, and you're just talking about this person's life, but it's all factual information about the way these people live. And as I said, some of them I really didn't actually know about, and so some of it I just found so amazing. And that would be your point of conversation as you finish the page each day, is to say, how does that compare to your life? How does, what does your family look like? Have you ever needed to live in a tent? It's just an amazing book, and so accessible, but for students to just read for themselves. But so strongly a positive book for a read aloud that introduces a narrative structure of a narrative style, but an information text. And the fact that you don't read the page top to bottom, left page, right page, you pop your reading, your eyes are everywhere on the page, picking up the illustrations, picking up the placement of the labels that fit the animals. It's it's an amazing book. And it's
just as you're talking there, Giselle, I thought a side thought I had was often when we're trying to find just right books for children, or some people say good fit books, we think of at the right decoding level for a child, but it's also their interest level. And often a lot of children love nonfiction, and that's they'll find a particular topic like whatever it's going to be, sharks or whatever, where they just want so many books on that area, and that becomes
because it's accessible.
Yeah,
they've got many things to bring to that. We can bring background knowledge. Yeah. We can bring vocabulary that we know to that text. So that's a good point in that. What does in choosing books, in having our students learning to choose and select books, that we want them to select them for all these different reasons, not just because it's got a number or a letter on it to say that it's at this level.
And in another podcast we were talking about high-frequency words, and often those high-frequency words are not because they're chosen by the Oxford list. Those high-frequency words are words the child knows through a particular interest they have in their reading, and those are the words they come across a lot, and they know more about those words than a lot of other children. And in fact, they become some of their high frequency words.
Yeah, well, and it's also vocabulary, building
and
rich.
Vocabulary,
it's vocabulary rich.
Yeah.
So they're knowing, understanding. They can read words relating to a topic because they know so much about it. You'd already said that it was a narrative and informational, and I think the term actually used for it is informational narrative. That's kind of like the
official,
term for it.
Yeah.
So,
that's great. That sounds. I'm ready to get that book myself, I think.
Oh, it's lovely. It's just a lovely book, and it's about I think sometimes, certainly what I remember from my sort of primary school experience about books about other cultures, books about other places, they were all exactly the same, except, the pictures would change depending on which national costume you're going to take a photo of.
Yes.
I don't remember learning things of real depth and interest about different cultures to the culture that I was living. And so a book like this, which doesn't really talk about the costume unless it related to like one of the characters in the story and the book is based in a desert area. So they talk about the clothing that they wear because of these reasons that, make sense where they live. Yeah. That's a connection point of understanding. And that sticks a lot better than saying in this culture we wear these pants, but in this culture we wear this dress. Like it's much more authentic about people's lives, where sometimes your clothes aren't that important to the lifestyle you lead, but in other places they really might be. And so it's just a wonderful book for opening that beginning point of talking about how different people live around the world and what does that look like and what experiences do those people have. And there's not as many books necessarily that might do that particularly well, and in a short format that's easy for kids to get into as a beginning point. And so it's books like that that let kids experience the joy of information texts and not necessarily because I have to use it for a research project, because you're not going to get a lot of research information out of this particular book. But it's your starting point, and it prompts the questions and it prompts the discussions of going, did you know that? Did you know about this? What is the climate range in that particular location that requires that clothing? Let's look that up. Let's find that out. And so I think there's books that become the starting point or that entry point into your further research work. And that's where there's another one that I'll talk about that is exactly for that reason, because I would see students who would find that we'd be doing a unit or a topic in a particular subject area, say it's history or geography or something, and their first point is to go straight to the internet and I'll type a keyword into the search and whatever comes up, I'll probably try and use that, and they'll either get streams of text that are hard to navigate and to sift through, or they'll have directly typed in the inquiry question and they'll write whatever Google tells them the answer is. And I go, oh, no. That inquiry question is for you, not what, And so I think it's about shifting that perspective for students of saying, okay, these are our questions, or this is the unit that we're trying to explore. What do we already know? And where can we find just a tasting, a point to start with about this particular thing that then brings more questions? And so one book that I love, it's not, I don't know when it was printed. It hasn't been out very long, I don't think. It's called Amazing Treasures, 100+ Objects and Places That Will Boggle Your Mind. It's by David Long, and it's just beautiful because it begins by asking, what do you consider a treasure? And it might talk about something ancient from history that's survived, but then it also talks about the Arctic ice. And, that's a bit of a natural treasure that we should be preserving. And so the book is set out into sort of sections about what people have valued throughout history, and it covers so many different interesting treasures from around the world, from so many different cultures. And so there'll be a section in there on the terracotta warriors, but then there's another section that talks about a particular area of rainforest that I'd never heard of, but how that's a really particular precious treasure in our world. And all of it is just it's either sort of a half a page or a quarter page with a really capturing illustration, no photos, just illustrations, and some captions and some other sort of features around it. But because it's brief, it becomes that starting point for students. And so we could read one of those sections in the class, and then at the end of the day, just read one of them, as our farewell, and then leave students, for your exit ticket or as you go, write down a question that you have now. Where would we go to find out more about this? What else would we want to know? And it's about capturing their interest and capturing their wondering, so that then, let's say it was about the terracotta warriors, here's a beginning point. What's missing from this text now that we want to know more? So that they're more strategic about what they look for, because they're not just typing terracotta warriors into their search engines.
Yes.
They know a little bit. They know it was this sort of culture or this time. And it's doing that through a book that really captures it. You're sharing that moment together as a class by reading that small section out, putting it back on the students to ask, what question do you have that wasn't answered in that little bit? Really making them do some thinking, which then leads to them doing better inquiry work about that type of thinking.
Yes, yeah. And I think that's the classic point there, is that rather than we're studying this topic and so these would be the questions that you're going to be asking, it's more about actually, what are you wondering? What are you thinking about? What's intrigued you enough to think, who knew I would even be thinking about that today? That's what all of these things really should be opening the doors on, is that we're thinking, that we're exploring new and that's it, isn't it? New and interesting things that we haven't thought about before or had even thought about making discoveries about. So I think that idea of the more we can bring information text into the read alouds and open up that thinking and conversation and wondering, you're absolutely right. We're building inquirers then, rather than, so I just have to find these set things, or I just type in my inquiry question to find things out. No, let me go exploring. What can I find? And what did you find? And what did, let's bring that together and talk about it so that it's a more free-flowing piece, rather than it only ever happens within a unit of inquiry on where we're going to write an informational text. It becomes part of our thinking processes, throughout the year, at any time.
But the mini lesson allows that opening up of the thinking processes, and they're kind of rehearsing that thinking in that mini lesson period, aren't they? So,
but we're not talking. Yeah, but we're just talking about read aloud at the moment.
Yeah.
But
it's also it also links to that skill of developing your questioning skills. And so it is one of those things that you can tie from your read aloud to your mini lesson, is going, we're asking these questions the other day about this. How do we narrow down which questions are going to lead us somewhere? Lead us to developing some more fluent information to a question that's going to give us a fairly closed answer and isn't going to give us, that absolutely links from what you've been reading and talking about in a almost an organic sense, I suppose, as all right, we've got 10 minutes left at the end of the day. Let's just read a page from this book today. There's the page on famous gemstones that have been found throughout the world. And being that, in Australia, recently, sorry, not in Australia, in Botswana recently, there's been some diamond discoveries. A page like that is fabulous to connect to news that's actually happening in the world. This is, when this book was printed, this was the biggest diamond, but guess what? In the last 2 weeks, that it's about connecting the interesting things in our world and showing students what that world is out there, and that our books are going to do it for us. Our books will take us there. Because a book like that, or another amazing one that I would love all classrooms to be able to have, the new Britannica, got to think of its name properly, Britannica Children's Encyclopedia. It is a huge book.
The Britannica All-New Children's Encyclopedia?
That's it. That's the one. It's good 6 centimetres thick. Like, it is a big book. And it's an encyclopedia, so you search through your pages, but it's that thing, like this treasures book that I was talking about, and like this encyclopedia, you pick that book up and you flick to any page, but in doing so, you might see a different page, and you might see different knowledge, and you might see something else, and you just don't get that when you're searching something very specific on the internet. You don't get that particularly. Like looking in the dictionary. When you do a dictionary search for a word online, you get the word.
Yeah.
You don't get any others.
Yeah.
You look through the dictionary and you see the word above and the word below and you go, oh, that's a weird word. What's that about? The same thing when you're looking at these
Great
books.
point.
The encyclopedia like this, which has it's just amazing. It's got every text feature you'd want to know because it's got photos, it's got images, it's got tables. It is so rich with information and the way to look at it. But it's just an interesting book.
So often we're looking through these information books for the sheer joy of looking through them, aren't we?
Yes, and for students that love facts and will read a Guinness Book of Records, this is their next step of saying, okay, well, you've liked a 3-line fact, but let's look at this one, which has a page all about, I don't know, atoms. Isn't that interesting? Look what atoms, and the diagrams and the things that help break down that world knowledge in a way that students can access. And in doing that, they look on the page next to it and go, oh, did you know the biggest alligator in the world was, and I go, how is that atoms? And they're like, no, it's on the next page. And you go, excellent. Yes. Good. Because that's what you want them to feel about information so that when they are asked to do for a curriculum requirement that they need to show knowledge about something, that they've got some passion about it, that they've got some engagement with it, because the way that they found their knowledge was not mindlessly kind of scrolling through pages of text on the internet, but they started with which is why people do inquiry, they started with an inquiry question. They found it through a book that gave them a taste and an entry point, and then they followed that line of thinking to develop it into something that's become their knowledge that they're now sharing with me as their audience in their information writing.
The excellent features in these books, I think, give them an entry point, an accessibility that is so powerful, isn't it?
Yep.
That's what we're looking at. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, one that Sharon, in that last podcast, and you mentioned The Street Beneath My Feet.
Yes.
Charlotte Guillane. We've got the first two of those, The Street Beneath My Feet and Skies Above My Eyes. We don't have the new one, the World Wonder of My World one. But I actually know a couple of small people who got those two books and opened those concertina pages out to their full extent down a corridor and then tried to line them up so that the Skies one went from the space sort of all the way through to ground level, and then join the next book from ground level through to the core of the earth. And they're walking up and down this corridor talking about, look, it doesn't totally match, but for them reading that and finding that engagement in that, and then having further questions of going, is this right? And can this be, that's the power that books have that you don't have, even from a lovely interactive website, you don't have that you literally took your whole corridor to lay out 3.5 meters of pages from these concertina books to see the scope of what your world is like.
Yes. And that you physically walked it.
Yes.
That you and physically walked it, and, right there at the end of your toe was something that you could read and find out about. And, they are extraordinarily stunning books. Yeah. And the detail, it's that complete integration, isn't it, of it, the illustrations and the text. Also, like, there isn't a space on the page, on these pages, in these 3.5 meters or whatever, that isn't blank. And we might go, well, that's a bit overwhelming, but it's this entire picture of, of whether it's the street and below, or whether it's from earth and way above, the skies. So all of these experiences actually become quite lived rather than, it's my eyes cast over them, and that's...
But also that we're doing it together as a class. We are having all eyes on it and we're discussing it, because, an alternative could be that we just put everyone on their laptops and they all go researching, and you miss that opportunity to really have that joyful experience as a class.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. You have books like that in the class library, or in even a very specific, we're reading information texts and learning about features and things. You get two kids who lay out those books on the floor inevitably there's going to be some more eyes over there going, what's that? What's that you've got there? That's quite large. That's amazing. Another series that does that similar kind of engagement. Do you know the Shine a Light books?
No,
I just love
don't.
them.
How have I not seen those before, Giselle?
Oh, my goodness.
Where have you been hiding them?
I do own a few. I'll have to bring some in. Yeah. They are just, in terms of engagement, they would be for our slightly probably junior primary to early middle primary kind of readers. The text is quite simple, but I think there's like 20 different ones in the series now. And so really clear information text about, but let's say it's the one about the vegetable garden. It's called Secrets of the Vegetable Garden. Really clear text, really bright image. But then it asks a question at the end of each page about what could grow here, or who could, what does the inside of the tomato look like? You need to grab a torch and you hold it underneath the image page, and it shines through further details in the image.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
And so every illustration page does it. So the left side is usually the text and the right side is the illustration. So you hold your torch under the right-hand side, and it shines through further detail in the image. And so it might be the page, like in the vegetable garden book, it might be the page about root vegetables. So on the page, it's just brown with the green tops. And the final gives you some information about how these particular plants grow. And then at the bottom, it will say what plants or what do you think could be under the ground? And you shine your torch through and there's a carrot and there's a potato and it's just fabulous. And so can you imagine, I
want those books.
They're so good and they're so fun and there's so many different ones. The vegetable garden we've got, which is great. The human body one is fabulous. You can sort of look inside and can you imagine, in your dramatic play corner that you've set up a bit of a hospital scene and you've got your bandages and a pretend x-ray machine, and then you've got your kids with this book, really authentic reading, looking through the pages to go, inside the body you'd see these bones in the hand, or it's just wonderful. And one of them, there's a space station one, so you can imagine if you'd set up a little tent, one of those blackout kind of tents, and you put this book and some torches in there and kids, glow stars on the ceiling of it or something, and now they're looking at space and they're immersed in a space thing. And it's definitely a book you should read with another person, because someone needs to kind of hold the book while you hold the torch. It's not, a little bit. It's such a wonderful experience, and there's Secrets of the Seashore and Secrets of the Rainforest and Animal Camouflage. That's a really good one. That's information text that really draw the reader in and draw multiple readers in to share, to wonder. And the fact that each page finishes with a question really lends itself to, as a class, talking about what other questions do we have about vegetables? Can we grow some vegetables here? What sort of things would we need to do that? And it's set up already to prompt that further inquiry, and that's a book guiding you there to lead you into your own investigations and your own inquiries. And so, a really wonderful series of books to, if a school library could have 4 or 5 of them in a box and you borrow them, with a bunch of torches, and you have them for a week of having these Shine Light books for reading, it would just, things like that would be amazing experiences for students to look at the magic that you can get from an information book, I think.
That's amazing. And maybe making their own Shine a Light book.
Oh, can you imagine? It'd be brilliant.
Can you imagine?
It'd be brilliant.
Yeah.
How
it'd be brilliant.
How would you do that?
Well,
what's the technology there?
Well, I was going to say,
a little science.
Well, science and technology. There you are.
Because I was thinking, how do they do that?
Yeah.
It would definitely be about the way that it's printed. I think you don't technically need the torch if you hold it in the right light.
Okay.
You can see through. And once you turn the page, the thing you revealed is there revealed. So you don't actually technically have to use the torch. You could just flick through the book. But
don't destroy all of that.
No, but that's only for us. We wouldn't do that with students.
No. But I can imagine kids could have cellophane across, and then they could have a silhouette shape over it. And if they shined a light through it, that
Yeah.
then they'd see that silhouetted shape even more strongly.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yep.
Yeah.
we're digressing, I think.
Yeah, but part of it is, like it's like art and technology.
Yeah.
They're the
Yes.
things that,
Yep.
I think we don't want to miss out from, well, we're not missing it out from this talk about these types of books. They're important elements of, the kinds of informational texts we're writing, and why not link those kinds of things to
Yes.
the production of what
Yes.
students are doing as well.
And I think the great thing is that, as teachers, we don't have to always brainstorm all these ideas. The ideas are already in these books that are out there, these beautiful books with these amazing ideas.
And students will run with that. Students will take that and go, I want to make a book about this. Or, if you have taken an inquiry then about growing seeds and what happens, a student might then say, I want to present it this way, and this is how I'm going to show what I know. And that's when you've truly given them that chance to genuinely show information writing in a way that's authentic to their knowledge and their learning, than just saying, you need to finish this structure because that's what information writing looks like.
Yeah.
Are you saying that there's shine a light books, but there's also glow in the dark books?
Do you know, I was going to say, I actually have one of these put aside for a small person in my household for Christmas because I could not go past it, because I thought if I wait till December, it won't be there. Yeah. So I've had to get it there, but I don't think he can. He won't be listening to the podcast. It'll be fine.
As long as he doesn't walk in the door any minute now.
No, oh my goodness. I think they're not particularly old. There's 3 by a particular author called Katie Flint, and she's written these 3 glow books. That the first one I think might have been The Animals at Night. The second one's Voyage Through Space, and the one that I've just bought is Nature's Light Spectacular. And so there's a sort of narrative element to these too, actually, in that there's a small character that goes across each page and is talking to you, the reader, about what is seen. So, for example, in the Nature's Light one of the pages is all about the Borealis, both the northern one and the southern lights. And so the page, full colour, full page illustrations, but each page glows. So you've got to charge it up a bit first. Yeah. But the Animals at Night, is about those that have that bioluminescence or those that have their particular eyesight, and that's just amazing. And again, you could have those in the classroom if you can create a little dark space and kids with torches looking and learning about the parts of our world that have light to it, and the importance of that light in, animal protection or the way the elements work in nature's sort of experiences. And and that's not a tricky thing, I wouldn't think, for a publishing company to do, but it's a clever thing to do to add that element that just brings the book a little bit more to life.
What age group do you think, Giselle?
That's probably middle to upper primary, or a very strong readers in a junior sense, so therefore a teacher would probably want to read it, because some of the text and some of the vocabulary coming through that is fairly scientific. It's presented in a manner that younger students would absolutely love to look at, the way the illustrations look and the glowing element of it, but there would be some breaking down of what that vocabulary means. For younger students, if they were to try and read it themselves, and so they'd probably get a lot of joy out of the pages, but to really get that engagement, having their teacher or their guiding person sort of work with them about each page that they look at and the keywords that are on there, and that's why I particularly love it, not just for the fact that it's a fun information book. We've got glowing narrative books, but we didn't have any information ones that glow, and so but I have a person in my house who absolutely loves interesting words, and so it's going to be a book that engages a lot of the things that he's really going to enjoy. So
Oh, isn't it, I'm just loving, well, as children will be, that the publishers are bringing them things that they've just been waiting for.
Yes.
In so many ways. These are the things that, like, we get excited about it as adults, because we didn't have these kinds. Well, I'm just talking from my experience. I definitely
didn't.
had no informational text like this as a child. You know, this was, and so as you said at the beginning, you know, that these could be in all, you know, there are books here to be in classrooms without a doubt. And in fact,
true.
not just one copy of them. You know, I'm even thinking about that encyclopedia, and I'm thinking I'd probably want, if I could, you know, 2 or 3 of those in a classroom, so that I've got a number of, you know, people that can pore over those at different times. But I know you've got quite a list here, Giselle, so what would you like to share next?
I was going to say just maybe 1 or 2 more maybe.
Yes.
Sure.
I was going to say one of them that really links to what you were just saying about having a copy in the class, and it links to lots of kids and lots of ways that they could work with it. The book, Amazing Animal Adventures, it looks like a look and find book because it's basically each double-page spread, and it's a bit of an oversized book, so there's a lot of joy in, you know, the lovely large book that you sort of spread out and pour your face over. And so each page is kind of a habitat scene with these comic illustrations, and you've got to find 5 of animal A and 6 of animal B. And so it'd be very easy to just write it off and say, oh, yeah, look and find book, got plenty of those in the classroom. But this one, the habitats in this book, it's not as simple as here's a desert scene, here's a rainforest. They're really specific places on the planet, and some of them I didn't know. And so I was like, what is that? Where is that place? And so it's phenomenal. So
intriguing.
There's a few desert pages. One of them is from Death Valley in North America, and then a different one is the Gobi Desert. And so each page is very specifically talking about what that habitat's features are. And then you're finding these really unique animals that exist in that space. And you've got to find 6 of this one and 7 of that one. And here's the mystery animal. Can you find it? But the thing that I love even more about the fact that this book is introducing so many specialised places of our world is the fact that it's got all these other things. At the beginning, it has a full contents page, and then there's a map of the world with a key, and so there's some other learning in that. It has a classification chart, so it talks about how animal classification works, and then it has food chains and food webs and the diagrams of those so students can understand what those 2 things are. It has a scale that shows levels of endangered animals from least to critically. It has an index, it has icons, it has sidebars, it has timelines, and it's all in this book that just looks like it's a look and find book. And you're like, actually, it's really not. It's the least of what it's such a simply, at a first glance, it looks like such a simple book. But it would be a magic in a class library because you would have kids peering over it looking for X number of these animals and whatever. But others who are going, I've never heard of this place. Why do those animals, the hydrothermal vents, that's a pretty unique environment in the world, and many kids won't know about that. So there's some question, how do animals survive in the hydrothermal vents? That's crazy temperature differences there. What do you need to be an animal? Let's talk about biodiversity. Let's talk about, animal features. And the things that something that looks like a simple book but can bring so much more information to students, that's the kind of text you would want to have in your class library to get that engagement of it doesn't look like a traditional information text.
And I always am amazed by when we make these kinds of text available, how those features of text start showing up in students' writing.
Yes.
Even if we haven't talked about it. Like there are some things, like you talked about all those features in that book that before you know it, that an icon might be used and you'll see that, turning up somewhere and you'll go, now tell me what you were trying to do there as a writer.
Yes.
Well, I added an icon because I saw that, or they might not know the name of it, but I've seen that in a book, and this is what lets kids go exploring not just for information but for how to present it.
That's right.
And so that's the real thrill of, it isn't a set, it has to look like this, but what do I know about that I can add in? And of course, some of my mini lessons can be explaining and demonstrating some more of those things to allow children to bring some of those specifically to their writing that they've never used before. But this idea that we are opening the doors on, by really critically looking at informational text to say, oh, wow, what can this bring to my students? Because we can't do it all, but we've got students in our classrooms who are ready to eat this up.
Yes, and have been waiting for it because they've maybe felt a little bit forced into fictional reading for a long time, because once you are a competent reader, a lot of what you're encouraged to read is more, read it for your enjoyment, but your enjoyment needs to be in narratives. And you go, well, actually, no, they might still really, really love information. And of course, they should be guided towards how to develop their stamina and their skills in reading and narrative. But there's so much of those comprehension skills that, particularly in the age group that I teach at the upper primary end, that I notice that if we don't have strong comprehension of information text, it's very hard to access the level of information that you need to gain knowledge in the curriculum level.
Yes.
And very hard to write at that level if you haven't been exposed to lots of that along the way, and exposed in a way that feels very natural for you, not just because you need to write in this style. So,
and having those features unlocked for you so that you know how to use them yourself. You've got an entry point for how to read much more effectively, and you've got a way to write more effectively in the informational way.
Yes. And if we just, I know not all listeners are from Australia, but in our Australian curriculum, the curriculum talks about our students should be reading and comprehending across a full range of text. So it isn't just that I like fiction and so I'm only ever reading fiction. We're teaching them, or I like information text, so that's all I'm reading. We are actively and intentionally helping them to read and understand and write across all of these text types, all of these. So, and, into more sophisticated levels as we go. And so, as you said earlier, some of our very earliest texts that our students are reading are in fact informational. And in fact, that's what we're doing a lot of writing of as well, in those early, it's not just imaginative. We are writing in information. So, yes, but this intentional bringing to the students, we need to search out really tremendous books like this, that can absolutely, like you say, our students have been waiting for them. Let's run with it.
And you're unlocking a whole lot of books for teachers today, Giselle, which is fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, hopefully it's helpful for someone. They're just ones that I like. Obviously,
how can we not love them? That's why we love your work. How can we not love them because you are, as we said, this intentional searching for text, and because you were aware of the struggles you were having around what you wanted students to be able to gain from text and be able to do with texts.
Yeah.
So these things, and I know you haven't covered everything in there. Can you just talk about actual size yet? Book actual size. Because
oh my goodness! I was going to say actual size and I Spy. They're huge hits at my house because we're animal both my kids really adore animals, but Actual Size is a beautiful book because it is paper craft, and so the illustrator has made all of the illustrations basically out of paper, which is phenomenal, and then that's been photographed onto the page. But each thing is the actual size from that animal. So you unfold an alligator's face, and that's actually a 3-fold page that unfolds, and it's full size to an alligator's jaw. Or there's the gorilla handprint, and so you can place your hand on the gorilla's handprint, and on the facing page of that is actually a pygmy possum thing, which fits in the palm of your hand. So it's life size on the page, and kids could, kind of hold their hand under it. And it's an amazing book because the information on the actual illustrations is fairly minimal, but there's a bigger write-up at the back where it goes through each of the animals. And they're from all over the world, and it's different features. So I think it's the squid eye, and that's like the size of a dinner plate. It's amazing. And for you to be able to say to kids, this is actually the size. Come and put your hand on the squid eye. Like, it is absolutely the size. Like, yeah, amazing. And I Spy, the other one that I've listed there, it talks about, the book is about how animals view the world, because, of course, the way their eyes work is sometimes different to the way a human's eyes will work. So each page has an illustration of an animal kind of sitting upright looking at you, and you lift the flap over their eyeballs. So you lift the eyeballs up and you get an image as though you're looking at what the rabbit, for example, and the viewpoint that a rabbit has. And it's just, and because you go page after page lifting these flaps going, whoa, that's how they see the world. Like, it's different colours, or it's fuzzy, or it's, the dimensions are sort of different, and kids love that kind of stuff. And and it
adults love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Hand up, that's me.
Yeah.
But that's engaging in their world. That's getting them to question the things that they know about their world, and that's bringing information useful to them at their level, at what they're ready to know about, at what they want to know about, and that leads them to make authentic texts that they want to tell you about, and want to share what they know. And that, in the end, is what we're trying to get our students to do.
Yeah, absolutely. The world of books, what would we do without?
I don't know.
It's like they are our other, we are the critical, adult in the room, but those books are doing so much work.
Yep.
There for our students and for us, in ways that we, that we can't necessarily do, but it is absolutely our job to go searching for those books.
And you've got a great list there, and we'll have that in the show notes for everyone, Giselle. We can't talk about all of them because we haven't got time, but
not today.
People
can do another one.
People could start a conversation in the Teachers Toolkit Facebook group. They could suggest a book or talk about a book that's in the list. But anyway, I think just like to thank you for that wonderful discussion today about information books.
Well, I'll just add one little thing, and that's to say to anyone listening, go to bookshops and see what's there, because I can't even begin to touch on the kind of books that are coming out now that people realise that our young people want to know about, and that there's a place for them. And so just, if you've got time and if you can, with restrictions and things, go to the bookshops and just spend time looking at what's possible and what might suit the young people in your lives, because there's so many and they're so good, and our young people deserve to have books like that in their world.
Yeah, we had Rebecca Bird from Peggy Williams on, and she just said there's so many coming out every week. She just can't keep up with it herself.
Yeah.
So
actually, I was just going to say, one of the other places that I think is a real little gold mine for searching for books when we're out and about is museums and art galleries.
Yes.
Their bookshops have often books, again, that I don't necessarily see in bookshops.
Yes.
Because it's quite a curated collection, and it's often my first point of call for particularly informational texts.
That's true.
Yeah.
So, and texts that are, really accessible for students. I know they're not always cheap, but neither should they be with the artistry and information that's collected around those things. Really, really acknowledge the writers and creators of those books, because there is just a world and wealth of information and wondering and wonder that is brought to us through them. So,
well, perhaps
it's good to go searching.
Perhaps if school budgets could allow for more children's books to be purchased, that would really allow for those sort of books to be included, rather than purchasing a program. Perhaps that's my political little statement there today.
Well, and I think if we really want to elevate our students' interest, inquiry, and the way they can produce information to share, like authentic information that they burn to share.
Yep.
If we can create that world for our students, then, and if we know that really tremendous informational text can help us do that, then as a leader, that's where I'd want to be putting my money.
Yeah. Great decision. Now, thank you, Giselle, for all that, and we'll move on to our rapid fire questions.
Yes.
Here we go. Get ready. What do you enjoy most about teaching and or learning?
Oh, I think it's something we've touched on here already. It's about that learning about the world. I think it's sometimes easy to be sort of feeling like you're trapped in your classroom, and particularly feeling that there's these curriculum things I need to get through, and this is the learning that's supposed to happen. But that's the thing for me of what probably why I teach, really, but it's about that learning and how amazing our world is and how much there is out there, that I just want to be the place that opens those doors to students and going, you can be anything and you can do anything, because look at the world that's out there for you. And so, I think that's the thing that gets me for learning, when kids can see that, or when I'm helping them to see that.
Isn't that amazing that you can explore the wider world together as a group, but not leave the four walls of your classroom?
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Amazing.
What do you most enjoy about good information books? You probably touched on some things.
When I learn new things, I know that I've probably said it a few times in today's talk, but so many of the books I go, I had no idea. I didn't know that. And that's fantastic for me. I love still being a learner and still finding out about what's there in the world. And I'm a very visual person, and so I really love the books that are coming out now, and the care that has been put into the way they're presented, really valuing the illustrators and the photographers, giving them their value and their worth to say, you're actually going to be on the title cover page here because your work matters. Not just the writer, although of course love to them too, but that it's such an important part of getting information across to students. And so when there's really great diagrams and illustrations and things that bring it to life, because I do remember the information books that I needed to read as a young person and just switching off. I just love that is part of what's there now. And, that's what I love about really good information books, is that whole package of how it's presented to show students how amazing our world is.
Oh, sorry. I just had a little thought about this that I did want to mention today too, is how informational text that we're using with our students, or information that we are exploring, whether it's a topic or a concept or, across curriculum areas, that the informational texts, how many times they are also supported by the fictional texts that we wrap around that as well, so that informational text isn't always just sitting in isolation of each other. There's just so much fictional text that also is full of information, that gives us even more insights into things, sometimes from a person's viewpoint or perspective. So anyway, it's nothing to do with your
I agree though.
about you here, Giselle, but I just thought that just reminded me that.
And from within a story, it can be very powerful.
Yes. So I think, I'm a big believer too of that when we are exploring a content area or a topic, that fiction has a place in that too. And that when we read fiction along with that, then we can read that fiction better if we are exploring it, because we're bringing new understandings to those situations, and vice versa. That those things don't work exclusive of each other, but actually add to each other. Yeah. Sorry, back to you, Giselle.
Best resources a teacher can have on hand for teaching literacy through information books. Well, a bit obvious, I suppose. But
I was going to say it's also little things like I was talking earlier about having the labels already made of the names of some of those text features. So at any point you could pull out certain books and go, well, here's the labels, have a go. What can you see on this page? Or things like that bring that engagement into the book. So I do have a magnifying glass in my classroom, because sometimes there's going to be a small detail or something and the kids really want to peer into that if we're reading a map, for example. So it's having those other little things, sticky notes, magnifying glass, torch, if we're going to talk about the books that we mentioned before.
A dark spot.
A table, as in a paper table for easy recording of your information. If you've found fascinating things and you don't want to forget it, here's a little table so you can write down, that helps you organise page number and your fact or whatever it is that you found. So little strategies that support the student reading, mainly independently, but also when you're then having a teaching moment, that you've got those little things that can help do it, probably.
Actually, that's reminded me too of sometimes some of the informational texts we might have in our class that may not be accessible, the text not being accessible for some of our students, having some sticky notes in the book with text written at a more accessible level is sometimes a really great way to, and so that just as a little tool of something being rewritten in a way that anybody in my class is going to be able to access that information. Those sorts of things are, little ways to just add to that mix of things.
Best tips for parents on helping a child with information books?
I think one of them is keep supporting your child to want to read them as well. And so, if they have been given a little bit of money as a birthday gift, or you're thinking about purchasing a gift, then consider a really good information book that ties into their interest. You'd said earlier, Phil, about, the child who loves sharks. Yep. There's amazing books about sharks out at the moment. Not that I'm particularly thrilled to look at the teeth, but, some kids love that.
Yes.
So, there's some really great books. They're not going to break easily. They're not going to date easily. They're going to be things that a child could really end up cherishing for a long time. And so have a look for something that really supports where your child is right now. And then when they're bringing home books, non-fiction books to read as learning to read or as part of things that they're doing, ask them questions about, that looks like an interesting page. What's going on that page? And what have you found out about that animal? Did you know that already? Just questions, perhaps feigning a bit of ignorance yourself, but asking the student to kind of tell back to you or the child in this case, what they've found out, and then that lets them see that you're interested in what they're reading and that there's value and joy in information. And so It might open up a flood of child-based, hey, guess what fact I learned today? But, you know, it's a lovely connection when you're sitting at the dinner table or something and they're just talking all about all the stuff that they now know about. I don't know. We get lots of those stories at our house.
Yes, and
I love it.
And I think in the other way too, that the how much as, you know, the adult, we can also go, I didn't know that, or this is what I discovered. This is what I never knew before, is a nice way for our students to, or not our students, our children, you know, for parent-children interactions, you know, that we're all learners here and discovering and noticing.
Something interesting you've brought into your class recently, an idea, a routine, an object?
I feel like I haven't been in class much recently.
Or last term.
If I go back a little bit, it was probably bringing those Olympic posters that I spoke about right in the beginning. This year's students hadn't seen them. I hadn't actually brought them out last year either, so the students I've had for 2 years had never seen them. I used them for a lesson on text features. It went okay, but they spent so long looking at the posters that we didn't get through all the feature points, and that was totally on me, that I should have given them the chance to read for fun first and go, hey, you know, I know you're kind of looking towards the at the time that we brought them out, the Olympics weren't on yet. I really should have given them a chance to engage with the posters just for the posters' sake before trying to use them as a learning tool, because I'm going, has anyone found the icon? And there's just heads down over the posters. I'm going, no, snap back to me now. Has anyone found the icon? And they're all reading and like whispering and pointing things out to each other. And I'm going, I'm just going to let that go.
They were doing that other thing you really want them to do a lot of the time.
So funny. It was so funny how it was, I really, I got everything I wanted from it, but just in the wrong order. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for today, Giselle. Another great session.
Yes.
And wonderful tips for teachers, and so much that we get out of having a classroom teacher on the podcast.
Yes, and your generosity always, you know, of your experience, of your knowledge, the way of working with things, what works, what hasn't worked. And the discoveries that you make, you know, about the ways that you work with texts, with students, and the power of, you know, what you bring in, you know, to really open their worlds.
Thank you.
Always, and your energy. Always your energy.
Thank you so much.
You'll know I'll talk about anything. It's fine.
Anyway, till the next podcast. Thank you.
Yes, until the next podcast.
All right. Thanks, Giselle, and thanks, Sharon. Thank you, everyone, for being here today, and bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.